Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to what is almost certainly going to be the most mad interview I've done all weekend, because I've now done 7 of these and I'm feeling a bit mental. And I'm talking to Alice Sharp, who's always a bit mental. So I'm so excited about this one. It's the one I've been looking forward to. I've known Alice now, gosh, a while, like some years. And I'm just excited to talk about random stuff, about play, about language development, about back to the foundations and the fundamentals and all the good stuff you've been talking about. So thank you so much for joining us, and welcome the wonderful Alice Sharp.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here. And I know that some of you have just been spending an hour with me, so I'm sorry that you're here as well. But, we've just been talking about language up the stairs, Matt.
That's good. I've got that.
And one of the things that the reasons I know Matt is because we've had conversations. And it was a joy this weekend. Yesterday, I didn't do anything except talk to people. And talking about play and pedagogy, we just need to do it all the time. You just need to live and breathe it. It needs to be oozing out of every pore of your body, guys, because your children need better language and communication skills. So please, if there's anything you take away from this session, Matt and I know each other really well. We've planned a cruise, a pedagogy cruise. We're going to cruise around the world with anybody who wants to join us because we want to have more conversations about play.
So the pitch for the pedagogy cruise is we go around the world. Alice sings a bit.
Might ask Kylie to come.
We were going to go to Finland, weren't we? That was part of it. Maybe we need one of those icebreaker ships. We haven't worked out all the details yet, but we'll get there.
One of the reasons that Matt and I talked about it last year, it's mad. Obviously, we might do a cruise. Who knows? You never know what will happen. But we do 4-day residentials now. And I've been doing this for 35 years. And last year, we had 60 people, in fact, Michelle was there, on the residential for 4 days. And it changed some of the people's lives because we had conversations. And our children, all of the statistics are telling us that our children don't have the language to have conversations the way that they used to have. So language is at the heart of everything. We talk about maths, we talk about science, we talk about STEAM, we talk about well-being. We need to talk. And Matt and I came up with the cruise because we talked. So you will never know. If you sit down beside somebody you don't know on the way home, guys, I am flying to Glasgow. God help the person beside me. Because I'm going to talk about what I've listened to over the last 2 days. So have conversations when you go home. And what you've learned during the last 2 days will sink in more.
And what is, tell me a little bit, what's been one of your best chats? The ones that you can talk about. What's been one of your best chats? What's something that you've learned?
Okay,
that's new,
so
exciting?
I sat over there writing little rhymes for some products I'm doing with Hope. And 2 young men sat beside me. And they said, what are you here for? And I said, I'm going to talk about language. And he said, I've got a 5-month-old, so they don't talk yet. I said, yes, they do. Yes, they do. He says, what do you mean? He doesn't talk. I said, no, he does. Because I have a little friend who speaks 5 languages and she's 5 because she's been surrounded by it. I said, so talk doesn't happen here. It happens in the brain and in the ears. And he's like that. Really? So he's a young dad. He's a physical instructor. He talks about physical development. And he is assuming that his 5-month-old doesn't talk yet. But of course he talks. Because he hears and he pays attention and he listens. So that was exciting to have that conversation with a young dad who now thinks something different. But he then started to say, I said, so what do you do? So he talked about physical development. He told me 2 statistics that I had no idea about. And I now know that. And it's brilliant.
So my takeaway from the weekend, I got to speak to Jacqueline Harding here yesterday, who's a brain and play expert. She told me there was a NASA study that showed that where they basically created this study to measure levels of creative genius. And the average in the general population was 2%. 2% of people were creative geniuses. And at 10 years old, it was 10%. And at 5 years old, it was like 25%. And at 3-year-old, it was like 50% of them were creative geniuses. And what I loved about that is we talk so much about what we can teach children and not enough about what they can teach us. Don't you agree?
Absolutely, massively. And I think that's some of the things that we talk about child-led play all the time. But can I just stress that language is at the heart of everything we talk about? Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of everything we talk about. Language is at the heart of But can I just stress that child-led play does not mean we abandon the children. Because we have so much to give. So if the children are leading us and teaching us, they need to be surrounded by the third teacher. The environment needs to be rich and fabulous, so they have something to engage in that we can then sit back and observe and scaffold and enable and extend. But if they're in an environment that's not rich, they will be less inclined to be creative. So if we get them to their 50% creativity when they're 3, it will maybe not be because of us. It will be because of the physical environment, the building they're in, the sunlight they're exposed to, the materials they are playing with, and the way that we step into the play and we step out of the play. Yeah. And I think creativity though, Matt, as well, I don't know, I think sometimes when we say the word creativity, we think about art. That's your automatic, even I am after 5 years of being a teacher. And it's, I've got a little boy that is obsessed by number, and Brody is so creative with number. I hope he will grow up and be the Chancellor of the Exchequer so I can get a pension. Yeah?
Do with a bit more creativity in the Treasury, couldn't we? Yeah, I agree. So what do you think we get wrong about language development in the early years? What do you see a lot of misconceptions around that you'd love to just go, nope, we need to be doing it in this way instead?
I think sometimes, I'll give you an example. I'm going to China with 5 other people, and when we were planning what we were doing for the 4-day conference, they wanted to start with a theory. And I said, no, I don't want to start with a theory, but I want to start with the child. And so I think sometimes we're going to do this approach. We're going to use this theory. But I don't need a building, I don't need furniture, I don't really need materials, I need the child, because nothing's going to happen without the child being there. And actually, a lot of the theories that people hang their coats on are very outdated, and they're not, I don't know if anybody has started reading up about futurists and what the future is going to be like. We've got a 4-day residential coming up, and one of the things we're doing is we've created a framework of what early years will look like in 2040 based on what the future is, the projected to look like. And so if we keep going back the way, and I absolutely love that I am Fribble's apprentice, Montessori's apprentice, because they can't refuse me to be their apprentice because they're not here, they're dead. So I can be their apprentices. But I think they'd be saying something different now, because children and childhood is different. And so we need to look at the theories of today. So I think looking back is important, standing on the shoulders of giants is important, but we need to look forwards, because all the statistics are telling us what we're doing this year is worse than what we did last year and 5 years ago and 10 years ago, because the children are not speaking as much, they're not as interested enough, they're not as curious enough, they're not as creative as they used to be. And so we need to change that. And I think it needs to be by looking to the future.
Let's do a little mini workshop of your workshop now. Early years 2040, the nursery of 2040, sort of robots rolling around looking after all the children for us, and I don't know, a microwave that you put a thing in and it turns into a lasagna. What do you think is going to be different in now, I guess, 20 years time? Or where would you like things to be different if we've done a good job?
If you look, I'm not a theorist. I'm an action researcher, I suppose, I play. And I think that in the 2040, we need children who have better meta skills. So they have better interpersonal relationships. They have belief and hope. They're brave. They're disruptors. They're full of nonsense and mischief, because we're kind of battering that out of them. We whip the carpet of curiosity away from them. If a child is not curious, they will not try and think creatively. They'll not try and think critically. And I think that we've gone too far. And the statistics are kind of suggesting this, and the futurists are kind of suggesting it as well, is that there needs to be some structure drawn back for some children. So if we know children have got language delay, for instance, in the past, before Eleanor Goldschmidt died, I had a conversation with Eleanor Goldschmidt about the treasure basket and heuristic play. Now, if you were to read her theory and the booklets that go along with treasure basket and heuristic play, she would have written to the effect that don't talk to the children during those sessions. If a child comes away from the heuristic play with a chain and hands it to you, smile gently at them and turn them back and encourage them to go back to play with more chains. If that 3-year-old comes to me with no language, I'm not going to not talk to them. And I had that conversation with Eleanor, and we agreed to differ. And then after 2.5 hours, she invited me for dinner. But the reality is that nobody knows your children the way you know your children. But unfortunately, none of us know the children that are going to be there in 2040. So it's almost as if we can't plan, but we kind of know that a blended approach, because every child is different, it means that every approach has to be different. So I interact with Brodie, who's obsessed with numbers, very differently to John Paul and very different to little Amy. Amy has no language, Brodie has got hunters. So with Amy, it is scaffolding, it is enabling, it's feeding her the words. I don't have to feed any words to Brodie. I need to listen and respond. So we need to move forward with that idea in our head and not get so caught up in one theoretical principle, and that's the way is, because one size doesn't fit all. And that's becoming even more about the meta skills of children, the ability to live our lives. Because realistically, as a mum, I wanted the nursery staff and the primary staff to love my children and to engage my children. I didn't really mind if they grew up and were a dinner lady, a bin man, or a rocket scientist. I wanted them to be happy. And that is what 2040 needs to look at. We need to encourage children to find joy and happiness in living their lives and in their learning.
I'm gonna challenge you a little bit as a thought at 2:30, 2:45 on a Friday. Saturday, gosh, that's where my head's at. What do you think about the idea that in part of the reason why you're so comfortable at going back to that simple point and to that idea of just being with the child in that moment and knowing what to do is because you have such an exquisite toolkit yourself of understanding the theorists and having that inner confidence in what you can do. And I think sometimes we also need to make sure that we don't forget to give practitioners those bits of the toolkit so that they can go back to the simplicity, because it can be hard to go there if you don't have those pieces of the puzzle, no?
Hugely, Matt. And it's challenging to think about. And I guess I have 36 years experience or 35 or something like that. And I've got a body of knowledge. The practitioner that I was 5 years ago is different to the one I am now, because I'm obsessed by biophilia, and I'm reading so much about biophilia, and I thought it's just outdoor play with a different name, but oh my God, it's not an outdoor play with a different name. Biophilia is, the scientists have again suggested, in our DNA, in a human DNA, guys, part of us, in every single one of us, in our bodies, has an affinity with Mother Nature. So you need to say to yourself, if I don't encourage children to like the bees, we will die. Because we need them to pollinate, don't we? If we cut down all of the trees to make wooden toys and furniture, there won't be any trees and we'll die. So it's all about little bits and pieces of taking the theory, and what Matt has asked, and for the last 10 years of my career, I've had 150 young people doing their qualifications with us, level 2, 3 and up to degree. And it worries me that the training providers are not going back to basics, that you can do a whole qualification, not in my place, but you can do a whole qualification and not learn about child development. And the processes that children go through in their development, in their physical development, their emotional development, their cognitive, all of the development processes. If you ask new practitioners or practitioners actually that have been doing it for 10 or 12 years, they struggle to identify what the benefits of the play are. And for me, materials helps that work. So I love using materials to say that, okay, let's do this with the blocks, let's do this with some spoons, let's do this with whatever, with the young students or the young staff, or the dinosaurs. The staff who are big lumps of lards and can't be arsed. Them too. That actually, if you peel away all of the noise and the policies and the curriculum and all that kind of stuff and go back to, why am I playing with this child? It's to help them develop skills for life, joy for life, happiness for life. They don't want to be bored when they come to play with us, do they? And so for me, if the staff don't understand how a child develops and learns and gains knowledge of how to be a human, then we're wasting our time.
And I'm going to label it, it's taking the conversation in a slightly different direction. I'm going to use that terrible label of staff retention, which sounds boring, but it's actually, are people having a good time? And I think it relates to this as well. We talk so much about all of the challenges around funding and pay, which are obviously massive challenges. But you also have to remember, if staff are not having a good time, if they're not having that love of learning, that's also going to be what keeps them in the sector long term, right?
And I think that's one of the things, and I'm brutal and horrible, I know, to say it, but we've been having so many conversations about one of the things that we feel about the sector now is we don't care enough. A lot of the staff don't care enough. You know, they care, but they don't care enough. And so for me, retention is about making sure that every single person that works in our service loves coming to work. They just love it. I've been married to somebody for 34 years, 36, well, whatever, it doesn't matter. A long time.
Who's counting? Long
time. And he, every day of our married life, has hated his job. Now, I can't imagine why you would stay in that job. And he has, and it has meant his life is not joyous. And why would you do that? And actually, so many of the young people leave the sector because the pay is crap and all that. We know all of that. But a lot of the young people are actually now looking for a work-life balance, but also to have joy. You know, like my son is 25, my daughter is 27, and they don't want to do a job that they're not enjoying because I keep banging on about it. Like, don't be like your dad.
You like your mum, I guess, is
or your mum, because that would be mad. But the reality is that you're a long time in your work. And for me, the people who have come back to us after they've left is because of the joy. I hated working in the office. I hated working in the bank. I hated working in that shop. I love coming back. Every morning I get up and I'm like, wow, what am I going to do in the sand today? You know, and so that joy will retain your staff. But if you don't have joy in your service, you're never going to retain your staff.
And how do you, I guess, joy and also curiosity, right? You talk so much about curiosity, but perhaps curiosity in the staff as well, to be curious alongside the child. And that's how you bring that curiosity to the child as well. Do you want to talk a little about that?
Again, we've got Sandra Duncan and Sally Hawley who are coming over from America to do 12 days with us. We're doing a conference in Glasgow and some residentials. And the reason I picked those two ladies, Sandra's 78, I'm sure she won't mind me saying that, is because every moment I spend with her is joyous. Because she loves children, she loves play, and she loves materials. And so every moment you talk to her is just, and it is about curiosity. And Sandra and I will go into shops and the shopkeeper like that, oh my God, they're mad. You know, like I bought 3 little toys, they're in my bag actually, in a shop along the street, and I've shown them to every single person that would listen to me out there. And it's an elephant, a panda, and I don't even know what the third thing is, but they're so different and they're fabulous, and I want somebody in this place to make them because I want every single nursery to have them. Because I walked in and the poor girl in the shop was like, oh my God, what just happened? I was like, oh my God, look at these are amazing. She said, it's an elephant. I said, no, it's an elephant. You know, it was just, and so for me, and I was curious in her shop, and Sandra and I, when we spent it, and Sally Hawley does fairy dust teaching in Wonderland. I don't know if any of you have ever done her summits, but she's got the hummingbird cottage in the middle of Massachusetts. Can't say it. A bit of America.
I think you need a little bit more language development yourself.
My articulation and enunciation is not very good, Matt. Yeah. And it's, yeah, we need to slow down, which I find hard. I'm a bit manic. And we need to, the most important thing, I talk about 6 golden threads. If our children are curious, they will look to connect. When they look to connect, they're making relationships with other humans, their peers, us, the adults, but also with the resources that are going to teach them, with the spaces that are going to teach them. And when they connect, they want to communicate. So you're giving them a reason, a why to communicate. What do they want to communicate? Their critical thinking and their creativity. Oh my gosh, let me tell you about this. And if we have curious children who are connected, who communicate their thoughts and their ideas and their imaginings, they're going to have child well-being, which is our sixth golden thread. They're going to be like, whoa, did you see what I just painted? You know, and so, oh my goodness me, those 6 golden threads for me have to be in every single moment we spend with children. And they start with curiosity.
Love it. I'm imagining the TV show that is the two of you just going into retail stores and traumatizing staff members.
I would love it to do, I would like to do that with Sandra, but what I would really love, guys, and I'm having a meeting in a couple of weeks, is to peel it all away. Peel everything away and get really back to play. And I'm hoping to convince somebody to make it into a television programme. What do we mean by play? Not play in the olden days or play when I was growing up, because my children are not interested in that. And the children next week and next year and in 5 years' time and in 20 to 40 are going to need something really different, and their play needs to be shaped and moulded and framed really differently. And so I would love it to be a bigger conversation, because we all know the statistics. If we stand on our head and juggle and do the fandango all at the same time in the nursery every day, it doesn't actually matter, because if they go home to something that's not like that, then it kind of eradicates what we do. We all know that it has to start with the parent and child relationship. And so the parents need to know everything. Stop keeping everything you know a secret. Tell everybody what you know, because it'll then improve humanity.
I'm going to give you an opportunity to be a little bit controversial here. I think you're right that we need to go back to strip things back and go back to the fundamentals of play in our CPD and our learning and so on. What are some of the things that you would maybe like to strip away that people are spending their time learning on, and what they should replace or improve by looking at getting back to play? What do you think we're kind of wasting our time on right now in the early years?
So I am going to be controversial, and I'm sorry for the people that were up the stairs, because I'm going to say something similar to what I said upstairs. So because of the world we live in now in social media and all of that TikTok-y stuff and all that jazz, we're influenced by different things. And we jump on what's sexy and what's now. And so I've been into so many services. I love in-the-moment planning, but I've been in so many services who have adopted it as an approach, who don't understand it and who don't have the skills to do it. So it fails miserably and the children miss out. And it's the same with plastic toys. And I was saying upstairs, there's some plastic toys on Hope which are really lifelike, and I know that throwaway plastic is the work of the devil, and I completely get that. But I've got children who live in abject poverty, and real food is brilliant and it's better than plastic food, but I can't afford. I sat with 12 pieces of food and I bought the real stuff, and it was £16.57. I can't do that every week in the nursery. I can't spend that money, and my parents certainly can't spend that money for children to play with the food. So for me, the plastic food will tell them what a parsnip looks like, an aubergine looks like, a beetroot looks like, but using a fir cone and some pebbles, because we're all natural, will not teach them that. And so we have to stop jumping on a bandwagon, and we have to say, what is it you need from me today? You don't know any of the vegetables. You've never been exposed to vegetables. So today I'm going to give you real stuff. We're going to mash them. We're going to taste them. We're going to do all that stuff. But then for the next 3 weeks to consolidate your learning, we're going to use plastic stuff. Yeah? Because I love wooden food, but it's not as real as the plastic stuff. And so you have to make those decisions. And I think that sometimes we're scared to make those decisions. It's like colouring in. I know that colouring in does not have huge benefit compared to free drawing, but there are benefits to it. That's why we've got so many adult mindfulness colouring in books out there. You know, I've had 3 little boys who have real mental health issues, and colouring in helps them self-regulate more than anything else. I'm not going to agree with the head teacher who has banned colouring in to not give them colouring in. So you have to be brave and bold and say, actually, what this child needs is this.
Love it. And I think the other thing I just wanted to ask you, I guess the point about plastic toys and going out, I know you are a resource lover. I know you probably are also somebody who goes and finds pine cones in the woods, and this is a really good pine cone, and loves going to secondhand shops and finding strange trinkets. And I guess I'm just interested in, when you think about a manager or a leader who is in charge of kind of resourcing their center or their setting more broadly, how do you think about resourcing your setting? What are the things you love to find? How do you think about things you're going to introduce and how you're going to introduce them? And yeah, I guess give some advice on that for those people out there.
And so I guess it has to be reflective of your community of practice. So I work on tiny islands. We've got 72 islands in Scotland, and I've got 110 of our population on Iona. And we go out with the 26 children in the school, and we pick broken glass up from the beach, and we sort and match, and we make mosaics with them. I am not going to do that in inner city Glasgow because picking up glass in the streets of Glasgow is not appropriate. and so it has to be reflective of your community of practice. Like my friend June O'Sullivan, who runs London Early Years Foundation, she tells a beautiful story, Matt, about how one of her nurseries is based at the end of a market. And they went and they bought a fish to come back and talk about a fish. And June said, "Why did you buy a cod? Why did you buy cod?" And they said, "Well, it was because they had lots of cod." And June says, "But if you'd bought a tilapia fish, imagine the difference between saying, 'Mum, today we learned about tilapias,' compared to 'I did cod.'" And I thought, oh my goodness. And so that's reflective of, I've got a fishmonger near me, but not near any of my nurseries. So June did that. And the same again, another story with June is she does, she's got a nursery in Soho. And so she does drag queen storytelling because the children see the drag queens walking past the nursery all the time. So it's completely relevant and realistic that they would be asking, well, why do they look so different? So the drag queens come in and tell stories. I might not think that that's appropriate on Iona, on the island of Iona, because it's not part of my community of practice. But to be honest, I think they should be everywhere.
I think it's perfect that we finish things off by you disagreeing with yourself in one sentence.
There we go.
Thank you. I know you've got a taxi to catch and a plane to catch after that, so I'm going to let you go. But Alice Sharp, thank you so much. Thank you all for staying late to listen. Big round of applause for Alice.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.